What happens when the man who was with the world's most beloved woman during her final moments breaks his silence after more than 2 decades? In this video, we reveal the truth shared by the firefighter who heard Princess Diana's final words. Secret he carried quietly for 20 years. It all began on the night of August 31st, 1997. The world stopped. A black Mercedes-Benz raced through the dim streets of Paris, desperately trying to escape a swarm of paparazzi. Inside the car sat a woman who had redefined what it meant to be royal exhausted, pursued and unaware that these were her final moments. Amid the chaos was a French firefighter named Xavier Gourmelin. He had no idea who she was, but he would soon become the last person to hear her speak. That night, an urgent call came into the fire station where Xavier worked. A serious accident in the Pont de Lama tunnel. No names, no details, just urgency. Xavier, leading a crew of 10, rushed to the scene. What they found was devastating. A luxury car crushed against a pillar. Paparazzi everywhere snapping photos, not offering help. Inside the wreckage, 3 unconscious people. The driver was already dead. The man beside him also gone. In the back seat, a man who would later be identified as Dodi Fade was clinging to life. And then Xavier saw her. A blonde woman, barely moving but still breathing. Her chest rose shallowly, blood in her lungs, but she was alive. Xavier didn't yet know her name. None of the rescuers did, but he did what he was trained to do. He gave her oxygen, stabilized her neck, and comforted her. Then, through the pain, she whispered her final words. "Oh my God, what's happened?" Not dramatic, not cinematic, just confusion, pain, humanity. Xavier held her hand. She seemed conscious. Her injuries didn't appear fatal. Fractured arm, cuts on her face, some bruising. He truly believed she would survive. In an interview years later, he said, "I thought she would live, Ashi." But just seconds before she was loaded into the ambulance, her heart stopped right there on the pavement. Xavier immediately began CPR, chest compressions, oxygen, heart massage, and miraculously, her pulse returned. She was alive again for a moment. The ambulance drove off, carrying Princess Diana into the night. But as we now know, that moment of hope was fleeting. What no one realized that night was that Princess Diana's most devastating injuries weren't visible. To the rescue team, she looked like she might survive. Her chest injuries didn't seem severe. She was talking, breathing, conscious, but inside she was bleeding to death. A small hidden vein near her heart had torn. It's the kind of injury, so rare, so hard to detect that even trained medics couldn't catch it in the chaos of a crash site. Before the world was crushed with grief, before headlines, autopsies, and conspiracy theories took over, Xavier Gourmelin, the firefighter who held her hand, disappeared into silence. He never revealed what Diana said, never gave interviews. For years his name meant nothing to the public. And when it finally did surface, the question wasn't just what he heard, but why he kept it to himself for so long. The answer lies in the strict code of the French Fire Brigade. Emergency responders were forbidden from discussing cases involving public figures, especially royalty. Any leak could lead to punishment. So even though Xavier had looked Diana in the eyes, had heard her speak her final words, had restarted her heart with his own hands, he said nothing. That silence lasted 20 years, and when he finally spoke, the world wasn't ready. His words reopened old wounds, stirred theories, and reignited heartbreak. He revealed that Diana hadn't cried. She wasn't hysterical. She was calm, confused. Barely whispering, she said, "My God, what's happened?" Then silence, just breath, flicker of life. And that stillness haunted Xavier most, because she seemed like she would make it. Everyone thought she would. But within hours, the Princess of Wales, the most photographed woman in the world, was gone. Her injuries, though invisible, were fatal. The torn pulmonary vein caused massive internal bleeding. She made it to the hospital, but her body couldn't hold on. 4 a.m., Diana was pronounced dead. The world didn't just lose a princess. It lost a mother, a humanitarian, a a rebel, in heels, and Xavier, a firefighter who didn't even know her name that night, would carry the memory of those final moments for the rest of his life. He didn't stay silent out of fear, but out of respect. When he finally broke that silence, it wasn't to sensationalize her final words, it was to honor the woman behind the myth, because the world needed to know who she really was in those final seconds. Not the icon, but the human. But before we talk about how Diana's life ended, we have to understand what led her to that tunnel, and why she believed she wouldn't live to see 40. The answers may shock you. Before the world knew her as Princess Diana, before the fame, the fairy tale, and the tragedy, she was simply Diana Spencer, a quiet girl from a noble but fractured family. She was born into British aristocracy, but not royalty. Her parents' marriage was cold. Her mother left when she was just 6. Diana often said she felt unwanted, always trying to please people who never truly saw her. "I was the girl who always came last," she once said, and that pain never really left. Then came Prince Charles. He had originally dated her older sister, Sarah, but somewhere along the way, he turned his attention to Diana, shy teenager, still barely out of school. Charles was 12 years older, and according to royal insiders, he needed a bride. Young, beautiful, and most importantly, obedient. Diana checked every box. Their wedding, on July 29, 1981, was watched by over 750 million people. A real-life fairy tale on the outside. What most didn't see was the trembling bride who already sensed something was wrong. Because Charles wasn't in love with her. He was in love with someone else. Do you know who? Camilla Parker, Bowles' now queen consort. Diana knew. She even confronted Camilla just a few years into the marriage. "I know what's going on between you and Charles," she said. Camilla didn't deny it. She didn't need to. The palace wouldn't intervene. Charles wouldn't stop. Diana was left to suffer in silence. The public adored her. She had a warmth, a relatability, a human touch that Charles never had. She hugged AIDS patients when others wouldn't even shake hands. She held children with leprosy. She turned duty into compassion. But inside the palace, she was falling apart. She battled bulimia, depression, self-harm, and worst of all, complete isolation. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she famously said, "so it was a bit crowded." That wasn't a tabloid quote. It came from Diana herself, during her bombshell 1995 BBC interview, the moment she broke every royal rule. She exposed the truth, admitted her struggles, and made herself vulnerable. In front of the entire world, the monarchy was stunned. The Queen reportedly called Charles and Diana in to demand a divorce. It became official in 1996. Diana was freer, so it seemed. But the truth? Her life only got more dangerous. Without royal protection, she was more exposed than ever. What's this? What's then the trouble with the hounded her relentlessly. Powerful men who once returned her calls now ignored them. She wasn't just stalked by the press. She felt she was being watched by others too. In 2003, a letter she had written to her former butler Paul Burrell surfaced. In it, she chillingly claimed, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident. In my car, brake failure, and a serious head injury." That's what Diana feared. She believed someone wanted her dead. She thought the brakes in her car might be tampered with, that she'd die in a crash. And 2 years later she did. Now, whether that handwritten letter was a genuine warning, or the desperate thoughts of a woman under siege, no one can say for certain. But the fact remains, Diana did not feel safe. Not in the palace, not in the press, not even on the streets of Paris. And that's where the tragedy begins to mean something deeper. She had left the royal family, walked away from power, privilege, and one of the most iconic titles on earth, but the emotional scars never healed. All she wanted was love, peace, a normal life, something she never had, not as a child, not even as a divorced woman. So why was she in that car the night of August 31st, 1997? She was trying to find privacy, just one quiet evening away from the noise. But the very thing she had spent years running from, the cameras, the flashing lights, the endless chase, followed her into that tunnel and never let go. Diana's last words weren't spoken to a prince or a palace. They weren't dramatic or rehearsed. They were simple. Human, my God, what's happened? That's the heartbreak, that even in death, she was surrounded not by protection or peace, but by people who only ever wanted a piece of her. But what about those who truly loved her? What about the men who tried and failed to give her the one thing she craved more than anything? Peace and love. To understand why Diana was really in Paris that night, you have to look at the heartbreaks that came before Dodi fade, and at the one man she may have loved most, who vanished from her life just weeks before she died. After walking away from the palace with no crown, no security, and no support, Diana wasn't chasing fairy tales anymore. She wasn't looking for royalty. She was looking for something real. A man who didn't want her fame. A man who didn't need her image. A man who saw her not as a symbol but as a woman. And for a while, she found that it didn't start with Dodi. It didn't even start after her divorce. Diana's search for love began while she was still married, locked inside a cold, crumbling marriage. One of the first names whispered inside palace walls, Barry Manicky, her former bodyguard. Diana later said she was deeply in love with him, believing they might have had a future together, but he was suddenly reassigned, removed from her detail. And not long after, he died in a motorcycle crash. Some called it an accident. Diana wasn't convinced. She once told a friend, "I think he was bumped off." Then came James Hewitt, a cavalry officer. Their affair spilled into the tabloids, love letters, leaked phone calls. One recording led to the infamous Squidgygate scandal, in which the public heard Diana call Hewitt Squidgy in an intimate call. The press tore her apart. But by then, Diana didn't care. She was done with shame, just wanted real connection. Still, none of those men changed her life the way one man did. Hasnat Khanna, heart surgeon from Pakistan. No title, no fame, no desire for attention, just a man who quietly saved lives. They met in 1995 while Diana was visiting a hospital. He didn't fawn over her, didn't chase her, and that's what pulled her in. She called him Mr. Wonderful. Oh. For nearly 2 years, they were in a secret relationship. Diana would sneak into his flat wearing wigs. She met his family in Pakistan. She even considered giving up her life in the UK, moving abroad, just to be with him. That's how serious it was. She wanted to marry him, but Hasnat was torn. He didn't want the fame. He didn't want the circus that came with Diana. He wanted peace. And he feared Diana would never truly escape the spotlight. In July of 1997, just weeks before her death, they broke up. And that's when Dodi Fade entered her life. He was the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fahd. He had yachts, private jets, luxury, everything, but more than that. He gave Diana something she hadn't felt in a long time, wanted, visible, adored, at least for a while. Unlike Hasnat, Dodi Fade lived life in the spotlight. Fast cars, designer suits, model girlfriends. He was no stranger to excess. In fact, when he met Diana, he was reportedly still engaged to American model Kelly Fisher. But none of that mattered when Diana stepped aboard his family's yacht. That summer, to the outside world, it looked like a whirlwind romance, sun-soaked photos, paparazzi flashes, headlines screaming Diana's new love. But behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. Some of Diana's closest friends believed she was trying to make Hasnat jealous. That the lavish gifts the ring Dodi gave her, what Muhammad Al-Fayed later claimed was an engagement ring, was never about marriage. Diana reportedly told friends she planned to wear it on her right hand, not her left. Imran Khan, then a rising political figure in Pakistan and a close friend to both Diana and Hasnat, once said she was still in love with the doctor and Hasnat. He later admitted he regretted the breakup, but by the time he considered calling her again, it was too late. She was gone. And maybe that's the real tragedy. The one man who made Diana feel truly seen, who loved her not as a symbol, but as a person, couldn't handle her world, and the man who could give her everything couldn't give her peace. That's who she was with the night she died. August 30th, 1997, Diana and Dodi were in Paris, just trying to enjoy one quiet evening, but they couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't walk freely, so even inside the Ritz Hotel they felt watched. Dodi crafted an elaborate decoy plan: sneak out the back, avoid attention, just get to his nearby apartment in peace. It was supposed to be simple, just a quiet night between two people who didn't want to be chased anymore. But the truth, Diana was still searching, not for Dodi, not for fairy tales. She was still longing for the man who had slipped through her fingers. Maybe that's why she let her guard down. She got into a car with a driver she didn't know and let her bodyguard, Trevor Rees Jones, sit in the front seat, where it was most dangerous, instead of beside her. Maybe she thought, what's the worst that could happen? But the worst did happen, and when the car crashed, when her body slumped forward, her final words were whispered to a stranger. Hasnat Khan was sleeping in London, unaware that the woman he once loved had just taken her last breath. So what really happened after the crash? What took place inside the ambulance? Inside the hospital? Inside Westminster Abbey as the world watched her coffin pass by? Let's go back to the night it all changed. August 31st, 1997, just past midnight, the streets of Paris were quiet. At 12:23 a.m., black Mercedes S280 carrying Princess Diana, Dodi Fayed, driver Henry Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees Jones entered the Pont de la Matana lot, nearly 65 miles per hour. They were being chased viciously by at least 10 paparazzi on motorbikes. Then it happened. The car swerved, lost control, and slammed into the 13th concrete pillar inside the tunnel. Henry Paul and Dodi Fayed died instantly. Trevor, crushed in the front seat, suffered horrific injuries. His face was unrecognizable, but he would survive. And, in the back seat, surrounded by twisted metal and shattered glass, Diana was still alive. Barely her head was bowed, her body slumped, her eyes fluttered. She was bleeding to death internally, though no one at the scene could see it. Her injuries were catastrophic, but invisible. At 12:26 a.m., emergency calls were made. Firefighter Xavier Gormelin and his team were dispatched by 12:32. They arrived. The tunnel was chaos. Flashbulbs everywhere. Photographers swarmed the wreckage like vultures, capturing every angle while doing nothing. To help, Xavier didn't know who she was. All he saw was a blonde woman, conscious, breathing, whispering. He leaned in to stabilize her neck, and she looked at him. Then she said it. "Oh my God, what's happened?" No panic, no screaming. Just quiet confusion, as if she still hadn't realized her life was slipping away. Brake failure, head injury. Diana believed someone wanted her dead. She feared her car would be tampered with. And 2 years later, it was. She died in the very crash she once predicted. Was it paranoia, or cry for help from a woman who knew she wasn't safe? 'Cause she wasn't. Not in the palace. Not in the media, not even on the streets of Paris. And that's where this story takes on new meaning. Diana had escaped royalty. She'd walked away from titles, power, and the world's most iconic family. But peace never came. The wounds went deeper than divorce. From childhood to marriage, all Diana ever wanted was simple: love, quiet life, safety. But she never got it. Not as a girl, not as a wife, not even as a free woman. So what was she doing? In that car, on August 31st, 1997, she was chasing the one thing that had always eluded her. Privacy. Just one quiet night. That's all she wanted. But the thing she ran from the cameras, the frenzy, the hunt had followed her into that tunnel, and her final words, they weren't for a prince. Not for a palace. Not dramatic. They were confused, human, and raw. And maybe that's the real heartbreak. That the most loved woman in the world died the same way she lived, surrounded by people who claimed to love her but only ever wanted pieces of her. But what about the ones who truly loved her? What about the men who tried and failed to give her what the crown never could? The heartbreaks that led to that final night, because to understand why Diana was in Paris, you have to understand what happened before Dodi, and the one man she called her soulmate, who vanished just weeks before her death. Diana wasn't looking for another throne. She wasn't looking for fairy tales anymore, she was searching for something real. And she started that search long before the divorce. One of the earliest names whispered behind palace walls was Barry Manaki, her former bodyguard. Diana once admitted she was deeply in love with him. She thought they had a future. Until he was suddenly transferred and, shortly after, killed in a mysterious motorcycle crash. Accident. But Diana believed otherwise. She once said, "I think he was bumped off." Then came James Hewitt, a cavalry officer. Their love letters leaked, their phone calls published. One of them launched the infamous Squidgygate scandal, where Diana called him Squidgy during a private chat. The press tore her apart. But Diana didn't care anymore. She just wanted connection. Still, none of those men shook her world like one man did. Hasnat Khan. He was no royal, no celebrity, just a brilliant Pakistani heart surgeon. They met in 1995 in a hospital. He didn't fawn over her, didn't chase her, and that's exactly what drew her in. She called him Mr. Wonderful. For nearly 2 years, they had a secret relationship. She wore wigs to sneak into his flat. She visited his family in Pakistan. She even considered moving there, leaving Britain. Behind, she wanted to marry him. But Hasnet was torn, hated the spotlight. He didn't want the circus that followed Diana everywhere. He wanted a quiet life, and wasn't sure she could ever truly escape the cameras. They broke up in July 1997, just weeks before her death. And that's when Dodi Fayed entered the picture, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. Dodi lived fast. He dated supermodels. He was even engaged to model Kelly Fisher when he met Diana. But that summer, Diana boarded his yacht. The world saw a romance, paparazzi shots, kisses on deck, tabloids screaming Diana and love. But behind the scenes, it wasn't that simple. Some, close to her, believed she was trying to make Hasnat jealous. That the ring Dodi gave her, the one his father claimed was an engagement ring, wasn't for marriage at all. Diana reportedly told friends she'd wear it on her right hand, not her left. Imran Khan, future Prime Minister of Pakistan and friend to both Diana and Hasnat, once said she was still in love with Hasnat, and Hasnat, he regretted the breakup. He wanted to call her again. But by the time he found the courage, it was too late. She was gone. And that's the tragedy. The man who saw Diana, the way she wanted to be seen, couldn't live in her world. And the man who could live in it couldn't give her peace. That August night in Paris, Diana and Dodi were trying to escape. They couldn't eat in restaurants, couldn't walk freely. Even in the Ritz Hotel, they felt watched. So Dodi came up with a plan. Sneak out the back. Avoid the press. Just get to his apartment. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic. Just a quiet night. But here's the truth. Diana wasn't chasing Dodi. She was still haunted by the man she lost. And maybe that's why she let her guard down. Trusted a rushed plan. Rode in a car with a drunk driver she didn't know. Her bodyguard sit in front where it was more dangerous. She was tired. Tired of being hunted. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of being alone. And maybe she thought, what's the worst that could happen? But the worst did happen. August 31st, 1997. 12:23 a.m. A black Mercedes S280 speeds into the Ponte de Lama tunnel at 65 miles per hour. Diana Doty, driver Henry Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones are inside. 10 paparazzi chase them on motorbikes. The car crashes, slams into the 13th concrete pillar. Henry Paul and Doty die instantly. Trevor is mangled, but survives. Diana is alive, but barely. Her body is slumped, her head down, no visible injuries, but she's bleeding internally. A ticking time bomb. At 12:26 a.m., emergency services are called by 12:32. Firefighter Xavier Gormelin arrives. He sees a blonde woman, conscious, breathing, doesn't know who she is. He stabilizes her neck. She whispers, "Oh my God, what's happened?" No panic, no drama, it's just confusion. It took nearly 45 minutes to get her out of the wreckage. At 1 a.m., they finally pull her free. But just 18 minutes later, her heart stops. No pulse. No breath. Xavier performs CPR, heart massage, oxygen. She comes back. For a moment, the impossible happens. He restarts the heart of the most famous woman in the world, but the ambulance doesn't leave immediately. In France, protocol is to stabilize patients on site before transport. It's a gamble and, some say, a fatal one. The ambulance moves slowly, only 25 mph. At 1:41 a.m., they arrive at Pity.Salpêtrière Hospital. Diana is critical. She goes into cardiac. Rest again at 2:06 a.m. Surgeons open her chest. Try to stop the bleeding. Manually massage her heart. Transfusions. It's desperate measures. But it's too late. At 4 a.m., Princess Diana is pronounced dead. She was 36 years old. Back in the UK, Prince Charles is informed just before dawn. William and Harry are asleep at Balmoral. They don't know yet that their mother's gone. At 5 a.m., the BBC breaks the news. Princess Diana has died from injuries sustained in a car crash in Paris. The world stops. People flood the gates of Buckingham Palace. Mountains of flowers. Candlelight vigils. Total strangers sobbing in the streets. The Queen stays silent. No flag lowered, no statement. The public is furious. On September 6, 1997, 2.5 billion people watch her funeral. 3 million line the streets of London. Sir Elton John rewrites "Candle in the Wind," "Goodbye," England's rose and sings it through tears. And then, it's the most heartbreaking image of all. 2 boys now, longer princes, just sons, walking behind their mother's coffin in silence.